Hello there, I'm Tom, and welcome to Real Shorts, short stories from Hollywood history. Beyond its cultural impact, Star Wars is one of the highest grossing films of all time, and of course is the brainchild of George Lucas. Though he didn't do it alone, like many other times in his career, George either had help or was straight up challenged to be a better filmmaker. In the end, the space adventure was a massive hit, but did you know the movie cost George Lucas upwards of $40 million in lost revenue? Of course, after the gobs and gobs of revenue he did get from the movie, but let me explain. To do so, I have to take you back before anyone knew what a Wookiee, a lightsaber, or even a Jedi was. A long time ago in a galaxy before Star Wars, no one understood George's vision, except for one person, Steven Spielberg. Of course, most people know that George and Steven are close friends and work together on the Indiana Jones films. The fact that Spielberg seemed to be the only person who got what Lucas was trying to achieve with Star Wars is probably not so much of a coincidence, but the fact that the two were so synonymous in their styles, sensibilities, and taste in film. Outside of Star Wars, though, George Lucas, unlike Spielberg, has never really been a mainstream director. Lucas's disconnect from the audience was evident from the start. His first feature, THX 1138, was such a commercial disaster that it ended American Zoetrope's deal with Warner Brothers to develop and produce 6 more scripts, including Apocalypse Now. This nearly forced the company into bankruptcy. American Zoetrope was run by a mutual friend of Lucas and Spielberg. You may have heard of him, Godfather director Francis Ford Coppola. Coppola, obviously not thrilled with the result of THX 1138, gave Lucas a challenge. He bet Lucas that he couldn't make a movie for general audiences, like a comedy. "Don't be so weird," Lucas reportedly recalled Coppola telling him. "Try to do something that's human. Everyone thinks you're a cold fish, but you can be a warm and funny guy. Make a warm and funny movie." Marcia, George's wife at the time, joined Coppola in trying to push Lucas into doing something more relatable. Marcia said in an interview, "I reminded George that I warned him THX hadn't involved the audience emotionally. He always said, emotionally involving the audience is easy. Anybody can do it blindfolded, get a kitten, and have some guy wring its neck. So finally George said to me, I'm going to show you how easy it is. I'll make a film that emotionally involves the audience." Lucas took up the challenge and the result was American Graffiti. Graffiti came out in 1975 and was a big hit, grossing an estimated $115 million in the US alone. With inflation, that's over $500 million today. The movie, of course, put George on the map in Hollywood. Lucas then turned his sights to his next project, a fantasy adventure called The Adventures of Luke Starkiller. Though, as stated before, nobody but Steven seemed to get the concept. Even though American Graffiti was a huge hit, Universal, the company that distributed the film, turned down Star Wars, along with every other studio in town, except for Fox. Alan Ladd Jr. was head of Fox at the time, and like everyone else but Steve, he just didn't get the concept. But he loved American Graffiti so much that he greenlit the picture. The rest of the studio, on the other hand, wasn't as thrilled with the now titled Star Wars. The powers at Fox felt that it was going to be such a disaster for the company that in order to get the movie into theaters, they packaged it with the anticipated adaptation of Sidney Sheldon's book, The Other Side of Midnight. There was some logic to their distrust of Ladd's decision. Sci-Fi wasn't a huge commodity in Hollywood. Outside of the Planet of the Apes films at that time, the highest grossing sci-fi film was 2001. That film only did about $51 million at the box office, so there was no reason for anyone, Lucas included, to think that Star Wars was going to be a hit, let alone earning enough to cover the $11 million budget. Nearly $50 million today with inflation. Surely none of this helped George's confidence in the film any, which was shaping up to be a big disaster. Much like Spielberg's Jaws, the movie was a nightmare to film, from locations being treacherous and sets getting destroyed due to bad weather. Lucas was also working with a mostly British film crew, which proved to be difficult. Mostly because of their lack of respect for George, because they, just like everyone else but Steven, just didn't understand what George was trying to do. Lucas was always dealing with something going wrong, and nothing was coming out the way he had planned, from on-set effects, costumes, and droids, to a year's worth of effects stateside at the brand new Industrial Lights and Magic. When George returned to the US after principal photography, he learned that the crew at ILM had already spent the effects budget and none of the effects were deemed usable. The perfectionist that Lucas was, he ordered them completely redone from scratch. Reportedly, Lucas even had to reshoot large portions of the movie because of the rear screen projection effects, among other issues. It got so bad that at one point the director was rushed to the hospital fearing he was having a heart attack. Luckily, it was only a case of acute anxiety. George was so worried about the success of Star Wars that he decided to make another bet that he thought would ensure his future. If Star Wars took a nosedive at the box office, it would take his career with it. This time, though, the bet wouldn't pay off the way American Graffiti did. And this is what may have cost George Lucas over $40 million. George decided to take a break from filming and pay a visit to his friend Steven Spielberg, who was working on the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Lucas was so taken aback by the production and the elaborate sets that it made him feel even worse about Star Wars. In a panic, an idea hit him. He would bet the profits of his inevitable flopping disaster Star Wars against Spielberg's surefire hit Close Encounters. At the time, anyone would think that Steven would be a fool to take such a bet. He had just made the biggest film of all time, and everyone in the world was waiting to see what he would do next. George, on the other hand, was worried that he'd be doing anything next and presented the wager to Steven. When talking about the famous bet, Spielberg told Turner Classic Movies, George said, "Oh my God, your movie is going to be so much more successful than Star Wars. This is going to be the biggest hit of all time. I can't believe this set. I can't believe what you're doing. And oh my goodness," he said. "All right, I'll tell you what. I'll trade some points with you. You want to trade some points? I'll give you 2.5% of Star Wars if you give me 2.5% of Close Encounters." So I said, sure, I'll gamble with that. Great. In the end, Star Wars made over $775 million at the global box office. With inflation, it comes out to about $3.3 billion today. Close Encounters, on the other hand, managed to gross a very impressive $307 million in comparison, which is about $1.3 billion in today's dollars. Adjusted for inflation, Spielberg's points could come out to as much as $40 million. A side note, it's not uncommon for people to think that Spielberg actually had something to do with the production or even wrote and directed Star Wars films. This, of course, is understandable. As I stated in the intro, they do have a very similar style, sensibility, and taste. Indiana Jones is a clear example of that. Outside of the bet, Steven Spielberg has no official association with Star Wars in any way, though. But many don't know that he did direct a scene uncredited for a Star Wars movie. While filming Revenge of the Sith in 2004, George Lucas was trying to convince Steven that digital cameras were just as good as quality as film, but cheaper and a lot more convenient. To further demonstrate this, Lucas let Spielberg direct the battle scene between Palpatine and Yoda. So what do you think about the bet between Lucas and Spielberg? Did you know about Steven filming a scene in Episode 3? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments.
If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a comment, like it, and help share it. Or if you didn't, tell us why in the comments. If you did enjoy it, then feel free to subscribe, but remember to hit the bell icon to select that you want notifications all the time, otherwise YouTube might randomly unsubscribe you. Midnight's Edge is completely independent and devoted to bringing you the intelligent analysis of the inner workings of the film industry and genre media. If you like what we do, then we would be very grateful if you could help us keep the lights on by supporting us on Patreon or on Subscribestar. Our backers receive exclusive rewards and bonuses. Before you go, check out these other videos that may interest you, and our sister channel Midnight's Edge After Dark for more live shows and more laid-back content.